Hey everybody, and welcome to the PC Gamer Show. My name is Tom Marks. Here today with me is Mr. Will Chesney. Will, how you doing?
Hello, I'm good.
Welcome back. I'm glad to have you on, man.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It might be just you and me. You know, first, before we start the show, an explanation of last week's happenings. I don't know if you were listening, but there were some catastrophic events to the point where it's affecting my words now even.
Ripples through time.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. It was pretty ridiculous. Basically what happened, for those of you who did see the show and saw me disappear, which we did it over Skype, and my gardeners, the gardeners that my landlord hires, were leaf blowing right outside of my window during the show. And then, so I muted my mic, and when I unmuted my mic, it just never turned on, ever.
Oh, good. Did you not know it was not on? Because
I didn't know it for a little bit until Chris and Wes were being like, "Hey, why, Tom, we can't hear you. Like, what's wrong?" And I was like, "No, I can hear me." And I was looking at my little feedback thing, and it was saying, like, "Yeah, you're being heard. You're being picked up by the computer." And I was just so confused. So I fiddled with it, and at the same time, I got them to be able to hear me.
Yeah.
My neighbor and two electricians came in through the back door of my house to fix my kitchen light, which I knew they were going to come, but I wasn't able to stop them because I put a note on the front door that was like, "Hey, please don't come in until after I'm done with this thing. I'll let you know." And they came in through the back because they didn't want to be disruptive, and they knew the kitchen was right near the back door. So the gardeners showed up, my mic died, and electricians came in.
Were they actually on the stream, behind you?
I think briefly, but not much.
Awesome.
And so it was just this,
the life of a streamer.
It was this pile up of things, and then I left, and I accidentally left my mic open, so Wes and Chris could hear, power tools and leaf blowers and people yelling and, didn't know what was going on.
That's awesome.
And I was just gone.
Oh, no.
Well, the technical difficulties seem to continue, as we were going to have a third guest today, Jared Walton, who's the senior editor at Maximum PC. For those of you who don't know, Maximum PC, the website, combined with PC Gamer, and he is going to be joining us. Let me just join him in. Hey, Jared, are you there?
I am here.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Okay, we've got voice.
Yes.
We had to switch laptops.
Okay.
Oh, did I not turn on my camera? There we go.
Well, we've started the show.
Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. Let me get the Skype window up.
Just to be clear, it wasn't a problem with the voice program. It was the computer just stopped working.
Yeah, my old Dell laptop is apparently not liking Skype right now. I don't know if I installed a bad driver or what, but it crashed on us twice. Once during our preliminary testing, and then it just crashed again. So it's out. Fun. Asus is in.
All right.
Hashtag PC Gaming, everyone.
Yes, there you go.
But thank you very much for everyone for sticking with us through the technical problems. Hopefully, Jared, we will have you through the entire show. But thank you very much for joining us, man. Welcome to the show. First time on.
Thank you.
So we got a great show. Enough to do about terrible technical difficulties. We're going to be talking about a lot of big announcements. Last week we talked about some great announcements already, with things like the new Call of Duty and Dawn of War 3. This week we have some more. Civilization 6 was just announced this morning. The Nvidia GTX 1080 and 1070 was announced last weekend, or just this past weekend, which, Jared, you were at DreamHack in Austin and got to both see that presentation from Nvidia and now have a 1080 sitting next to you, I imagine.
Yes. So actually, DreamHack was going on, which I guess was why they did it in Austin, ostensibly. Is a little crazy timing doing it Thursday through Saturday rather than Monday through Wednesday. But they did bring in people from DreamHack with all the press that were in to do their presentation, their live stream on Friday evening. So if you had no date, no life, whatever, and you wanted to watch Twitch last Friday, you could watch the NVIDIA stream. So I wasn't quite sure what they were going to show. I mean, we kind of suspected GTX 1080 was the name, and we weren't sure how many details they were going to give out. They did tell us that it's 2560 cores for the 1080, and its MSRP is going to be $600, but the Founders Edition, which would be what they sent us home with, the Founders Edition will be $700, and that's pretty much not to compete with their their add-in board partners. So
Right.
Asus, EVGA, XFX, whoever, like they sell cards for MSRP, and Nvidia's like, hey, we're going to make this. If you want to buy the reference board, you can now. It will cost more.
Right.
Anyway.
And we can get more into the details of the 1080 in that line and all that stuff later in the show.
Sure.
But we'll also be talking about Battlefield 1, which was the big announcement on Friday. So we're going backwards in announcements. And then, of course, we have Will on the show. And if anybody's seen Will on the show before, we got to talk about PlanetSide 2.
Yeah,
and
always.
we brought you on specifically because PlanetSide 2 has been just updated pretty recently, and it's got some cool things going on.
It's got some cool things, and it's the player base has jumped up again, which is super fun. So it's a good time to play.
Cool.
So we can talk about that.
Yeah, and then of course
Why it's special.
we will be taking your questions from Twitch chat. So stick around to the end if you've got any questions. But first, let's talk about what we've been playing recently. Will, besides PlanetSide 2, which
I've actually been playing a ton of, but I've been playing a bunch of Overwatch. I mean, it was the open beta this weekend. I actually got lucky and got into completely random chance. Like, it wasn't because I work here or anything like that. Like, I total luck of the draw got into the closed beta for Overwatch. So I've had access to it for a while, but my friends haven't, so I haven't been playing it that much, but then everybody was able to jump in this past weekend, and we played a ton. So that was super fun.
And I hope some of the listeners, the regular listeners of the show, got to jump into that too, because Lord knows I've talked about it enough, and it's nice for you guys to actually have it in your hands for once.
Yeah, it's a cool arena shooter. What I discovered is when you're playing with friends, it is so much better.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have a party of 6, and the community has been pretty good too, like randoms that I play with. Like, once you sort of group up with them and you start talking, it's got a good in-game chat. So once you start talking and you can kind of talk out strategy and stuff, even playing with randoms in a party is fun. But playing in a party just makes such a huge difference.
It does. It really, really does.
Yeah. In fact, we got to play a little bit. I mean, it's, compared to other arena, I mean, we've talked about this so much, Overwatch, but compared to other arena shooters, you've got these massive abilities that you can use periodically that makes the characters feel more like MOBA characters in a way, because you have these like ultimates or these heroic abilities that you can use. And so once you're playing with a good team, you can start timing those and stacking those, and you're thinking about, okay, they've got this player and that player on the other team, so let's wait until so-and-so uses their ability, and then we'll use ours. And so there's a lot of interacting with the characters, which is, I don't know, it feels really good.
Yeah, and one of the things I enjoyed seeing, at least on the subreddit and stuff like that, is a lot of the same complaints that showed up when the closed beta first started kind of cropping up again.
Right.
Like, a lot of people were complaining about Bastion and Torbjorn, which are incredibly frustrating characters to play against, but people eventually sort of figure out how to play against them, and it takes longer than a weekend, to really figure that out. But when the closed beta first started, for the first couple weeks, everyone was like, Bastion and Torbjorn, and then that totally dipped off, and now in this open beta again, everyone's complaining about Bastion and Torbjorn again. Totally, I'm not saying that's, unfounded complaints.
No, I mean, they are really good, but the tools are there to deal with them. You just have to adapt and react. I mean, you can change your character at any point during the game. You're not locked into it, which is great. I mean, and you can play multiple of different characters. I mean, we played a match where it was, it's a 6-man team, so 5 of us played a character called Roadhog, who's just this big, beefy tank with a skill shot chain that you throw out and grab an enemy player and pull them into you, and then you've got a shotgun. With 5 of us playing Roadhog and 1 person playing a healer, Lucio, we wrecked because we had so much sustain, and we had enough damage going on. I mean, it was just super fun. I mean, the fact that you can do that kind of strategy is pretty neat.
And the key there too, just to touch on that for a little longer, is the enemy team didn't respond.
But they could have.
They could have, but they kind of stuck to their heroes, and they lost because of it. And if they had changed to heroes like McCree, who could take out a Roadhog just with a right click,
Right.
it would have made a difference, but they didn't do that.
Right. I mean, it's like, there's a very powerful sniper in the game called Widowmaker who, has very high mobility with her, with a hook shot that she can kind of get up on ledges and stuff. And she's a great sniper. But if you're dealing with that, you can pull a character called Genji, who's really high mobility, does a lot of damage, and just wrecks Widowmaker. So it's like people will complain, like, oh, Widowmaker, and then somebody else will, just pull the counter to that. So that's really cool.
Real quickly, I do have to call out Constant Sky in the chat. Says you're wearing your headphones backwards and it's bugging them.
Am I really?
You are. I'm.
We only have. I mean, it's all coming through one track, so so to me it just sounds the same.
Yeah.
But that's how I play PlanetSide too. It's a MLG strategy.
Gotcha.
Then you think someone's on your left, but they're really on your right, and it just keeps you on your toes.
Jared, what have you been playing lately,
Thank you.
man? We haven't ever had you on the show, so we don't know your tastes yet.
So, I'm more of an RPG guy. I was really into Fallout series. I mean, I go way, way back. I played the original Wasteland on a Commodore 64 back in the 80s. And so, when it went to, Fallout later on, and that was great. I kickstarted Wasteland 2. Lately, I've honestly been playing almost no games. I've been testing benchmarks with, I've got 12, 14 different graphics card configurations I test. So I've been running through a bunch of DX12 versus DX11, Vulkan versus DX11 tests. It's pretty limited. Basically, I've tested Ashes of the Singularity with the current build. I am testing Rise of the Tomb Raider and Hitman, and then I ran through Talos Principle. That's what I've been doing the last couple of days. And Talos Principle is Vulkan, and right now it's pretty much a drop in performance across the board. Someone had said it had gotten better. So I was like, oh, I should go and check that out. And I'm like, nope, Vulkan's still worse performance. So it's like a work in progress, right?
Yeah.
DX12 stuff, it's really interesting because everyone keeps saying AMD's better for DX12. And I'm like, I don't know that that's really the case, that they're better. It's that with little effort, they seem to show more of an improvement over their DX11. And that could simply be that their DX11 drivers aren't as good as their as NVIDIA's DX11 drivers. So it's hard to beat NVIDIA's driver team, and you basically have to put more effort into optimizing your DX12 code is kind of my take. And even when everything works out, it's often 3 to 5% difference, maybe 10%. So it's not this huge, oh, you can do things that you couldn't before. The one exception is Ashes of the Singularity, which throws so many units and stuff at the game that if you're running a DX11 version, it basically chokes on your CPU and your drivers, and DX12 really opens that up, and that happens on both NVIDIA and AMD. So that's kind of what I've been doing the last couple of weeks. Before that, what was I playing before I got sucked into benchmarking?
Well, real quick, I have a question about Ashes. Have you done any testing with Ashes of the Singularity with an AMD card and an NVIDIA card together? Because I remember them talking about how that worked.
Yeah, so this is the cool promise of low-level APIs like Vulkan and DX12 is you can literally do anything that you want as a developer with them. So, hey, you see an NVIDIA GPU, an AMD GPU, and an Intel integrated graphics chip. You could use all of those to do different things. The reality is what Ashes has done is called explicit multi-adapter mode, and they are using AMD and NVIDIA only. They don't support Intel on this because in order to get good performance, your cards have to be close to the same performance level. So Fury X and a Titan X or a 980 Ti works fine. Fury X and an R9 380 not going to work so well. Fury X and a GTX 950 probably going to totally mess up and not work at all or degrade performance. So as long as they're close to the same level, you're okay. And interesting, I mean, like Ashes of the Singularity, it's a game that was first a demo that was first built as a demo to demonstrate AMD's Mantle API. So its roots are in AMD's Mantle API. So not surprisingly, it tends to run a little bit better on AMD hardware. And if you're doing AMD plus NVIDIA, usually you're better off with AMD as your primary card and NVIDIA as the secondary. If you swap the cards around, you actually will often lose a bit of performance. So just interesting stuff. But you know, it's people I've heard them say, "Oh, well, that's cool until NVIDIA breaks this with the driver update." And it's like, no, you don't understand. Explicit multi-adapter says you support this low-level API, and what the developer does is up to the developer. So there is no breaking it while still being a low-level API. It will work, but so far the only developer to do this is Ashes of the Singularity's Oxide. So
that's a pretty cool functionality, though. I had not heard of that. Mixing the cards.
That was also, I feel like, a great introduction to Jared on this show. Just because, like if anybody's
super
seen,
nerd.
If anybody's seen,
we're all super nerds here. Let's be honest.
Indeed, it's nothing to.
We
be
have our
ashamed of.
areas, though.
Yes.
If anybody's
I'm the
seen My
hardware
Cousin
nerd.
Vinny, My Cousin Vinny, when they get Mona Lisa Vito, his wife, up on the stand, and they're like asking her why she's qualified to talk about automotive things, and she just goes on this crazy technical tear. That was your Wadir from My Cousin Vinny.
There you
Three
go.
people got that reference, but I love those three people. Moving right along, I want to talk briefly about what I've been playing because you guys mostly know it already. I was playing Overwatch with Will some too, which I really enjoyed. I've been playing Duelist still a bit, and then also I got to go down to Blizzard's campus and actually play Heroes of the Storm with some of the developers. They showed off a couple of the new characters, Chromie and Medivh. Medivh is going to be absolutely insane in that game.
I think Chromie's going to be pretty cool too, actually.
Chromie's going to be cool, but
She's kind of gotten overshadowed by the Medivh announcement.
She
but
totally has.
I think she'll be a pretty dope caster.
Yeah, she plays with time. She's like a dragon gnome, but she never actually stops being a gnome. She's always a dragon in the game.
Or you mean she's always a
excuse
gnome
me,
in the game?
Yeah, she's always a gnome in the
Yeah.
game. Sorry.
Just cool.
And Medivh,
cool.
though, is
Yeah.
like, he's this guy that can just change the meta on his own. Like, I posted a link to the piece I wrote about it, but, like, it's so crazy because he has an ability that just lets you teleport your entire team instantaneously, the entire width of your screen, essentially, like a 1080p monitor. And it's just baffling to think how strong that ability is going to be because it's not like an engaging tool. It skips the engage. It just starts the fight.
Right. Right.
It's really cool, and he's going to be very, very cool to the game.
Well, and it's super versatile too. I mean, and it's cool that Blizzard is playing with some of those tools. Like, okay, how do we mix this up? I mean, because it will change things. Just having that available to the teams. And it's interesting. I mean, it's not, there's another character, the medic, Lieutenant Morales, who one of her heroic abilities is that she can summon a dropship that the whole team can jump into similarly and go anywhere on the map. The difference is that this is on this is one of Medivh's basic abilities, and it's on a very short cooldown for what it is, but the dropship still will have its purpose because you can get like across the entire map.
you can go boss
it's a
to
little
boss.
different. Yeah, exactly.
Like if you were on the
Curse.
Raven one, Curse.
Yeah.
Yes, Raven
Yeah.
Hollow.
Yeah. So I think it'll be super cool.
Yeah. There's a couple people in the chat mentioning Stellaris as well, and Stellaris is a game I'm excited for. Have not had a chance to dive into yet, but I know that James and Evan have been playing that game a lot. So
They seem to really like it too.
yeah. I'm pumped to try it. So hopefully we'll be talking about that next week in our now playing section as well.
What Evan said something about it, like the early game feels like a space exploration game the way it should. Something like, I don't know, it's some quote, but I mean it seems like a very cool 4X kind of situation.
Yeah.
Sounds like it kind of gets bogged down in the mid to late game or something was the big complaint.
Yeah,
It doesn't carry the great expectations of the start don't carry through.
Yeah, that was what Phil Savage over in the UK, our reviewer, said about it. That was one of the main criticisms of the now infamous IGN review about it, where everyone's crying foul on that. But, it's been getting very, very positive reviews besides that. And especially, everyone has their tastes in games, and especially with a game like 4X game like that, there are going to be people that have different opinions about it, and just fundamentally, that's
well. And
unavoidable.
70's not bad, right? 70
No.
says if you like this genre, you'll like this game.
Yeah.
Right. It's more, it's more about thinking about the game for the entire audience of PC gamers. Yeah, there are going to be people who just aren't into that.
But let's jump along to a different strategy game.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Civ 6. This just got announced this morning.
Yeah.
We were actually going to have a longer topic about Heroes of the Storm, but Civ 6, man, how can you not talk about Civ 6 right now? So I'm going to pull up some screens
Pretty cool.
for the benefit of our Twitch audience, and I'll also post the link into the chat. But if you go to PCGamer.com, it should be the top story right now. Mm-hmm. One of the most immediately surprising things, I guess, so far is that they've sort of changed the art style a little bit.
Yeah.
It's not really hyper realistic anymore. It's this very kind of cartoony, almost like a combination of Civ 5 and Civ Revolution. The console game that was in a console and I think then mobile exclusive.
We love those here.
Yes, we love console and mobile exclusives at PC Gamer. But no, it's got this I've heard a lot of people criticizing the art style so far for being kind of very generic-y and very plasticky and not what you know Civ for. But I'm actually really into it.
So I have mixed feelings about it. I like Overwatch. One of the big complaints about Overwatch is it's cartoony. So I don't mind cartoony. It's not that, but it doesn't feel civvy to me. It feels a little too goony. So aesthetically, I'm not a big fan, but practically, I like it because what they did is, can you pull it back up?
Yeah.
One of the things they did with it is it makes everything very visually clear. So I think they cut out a lot of clutter, and that's part of why it looks a little bit. That's why it looks a little bit cartoony, because you have these kind of I don't know, just look at these guys' swords. They're just giant. But what I like is it's very clear. It's visually clear, and I think that they did a really good job with that.
Yeah.
And one of the other big things that they added to the game is these districts for your city. So instead of your city just being one little tile and then you kind of see the expanse as it goes, you actually have different tiles for different parts of the city. So you'll have you can see a little amphitheater kind of thing there, and that'll be a specific zone. So you can kind of visually look at somebody's city and see what things are in it without having to click on it and go through and oh, what buildings do they have?
Yeah, and this blue area over here is called the campus, and that's the science district where your university, when you build your university, it shows up in that district of your city. And if you place that on a mountain or near hills, it'll get a science bonus, Yeah. And they've done that across the board. It seems like they've given each kind of stat its own thing, it seems. Maybe I'm wrong about that, because there are also harbors as a district where you can that influences trade, I'd imagine.
And research, which we can talk about a little bit too.
Yeah,
but,
I really like the changes to research. One of the things they did is if you're researching, it's not just your science input increases and then things cost more. It's a little bit more nuanced, so that if you're researching something like pottery or masonry or something like that, you can build a quarry, and that quarry will give you research points towards that tech, which is interesting.
Cool. Yeah. The idea being if your citizens are mining all day, working with stone, they're gonna be better at masonry type technology. So. And similarly, if you're a completely landlocked civilization to start, if you try to, pursue anything nautical, you're going to have a disadvantage in that research. Whereas if you're a coastal city, your citizens are near the water all the time, so they're thinking about water stuff, and so there's like this bonus to that. And if you've got a bunch of fishing boats out, that's going to actually help your research into military nautical stuff too.
Yeah,
it's kind of all ties in together, which is cool. I think it will make it feel more dynamic and give location a bigger strategic importance.
Yeah.
So.
And people are going to complain, but I mean, like I go way back with Civilization. I nearly failed out of college when the original launched. So it's like everyone changes a little bit, and people always complain, and other people like it. I think it's good because like the last few have felt very similar and iterative. So doing something more to change it up, I think is a good move.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree as well. I think that, like you said, though, Will, I understand the people that don't like the art style specifically because it is a very, very big change. But I'm all about it. Like, I think that just because a lot of people are saying, "Oh, it looks like a mobile game," and I get that because it kind of does. But I don't think that necessarily means they're going to make it like a mobile Civ.
Right, well,
like, they're not going to make it like dumbed down.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to play like that at all. I mean, the systems are probably going to be more complicated and intricate in a good way. Yeah, I just don't like the look. I mean, that won't stop me from playing. And again, I do like that it's visually easier to parse.
Yeah.
I think that's very cool.
Somebody in the chat mentioned, doesn't that mean it's going to have lower specs too if it's not this like photorealistic look? And I actually thought that was interesting because there's a lot of times I love playing on huge Civ maps, like the largest you can do, and the later turns on those maps. It's kind of hysterical how even on strong computers you hit the end turn button and you're just waiting for maybe like a minute or two for all of the processes to kind of go through. And if the art style is simplified, it's a little cleaner, it's a little simpler, it's easier to render, that might not be as much of a problem.
So the interesting thing here is like the last one, Civilization Beyond Earth, it had mantle support, which was a big thing for AMD. And the problem with it was like Civ is not a graphically intensive game. It's not like Doom or a shooter where having high frame rates is critical. And the reality is, the graphical style might lessen the load on the CPU a bit, but what you're talking about, the end turn and the late game where it just takes forever, that's almost all CPU. And so it's like even if the graphics were not there, like they could shut off graphical rendering and it would probably still be a beast to compute everything that's going on. There's just so much AI and everything else they have to figure out.
Yeah.
Also, I mean, simple graphics doesn't necessarily mean that the graphics card won't be working.
Yeah.
I mean, like, if you think about it, here's an example. If you think about Pixar, they've got sometimes a very simple, like, artistic style in their movies, but I bet those movies take a long-ass time to render. Just saying.
Fair enough. All right, man. There was a Soviet Misaki in the comments says, I just hope they don't abuse DLC because add-ons for Civ 5 can be pretty expensive overall. I think that is a concern that I've seen across the board. Everyone, some people are like, oh, I don't like the districts. Other people are like, I like the art style. Some people disagree. Everyone has differing opinions on this stuff. I think pretty much everyone is like, I just don't want it to take 2 DLC expansion packs for them to get it right this time. Because that's sort of what happened with Civ 4. That's sort of what happened with Civ 5. And it started to get fixed in Beyond Earth. The last expansion really kind of started fleshing that game out more. And then they are now making Civ 6. So I totally agree with that. I really, really hope that this is a satisfying experience on the first expansion.
I mean, to be fair with Civ 5, I was happy from the get-go, but the DLC definitely adds to the game, and it definitely fills the holes that you start running into the more you play. So, yeah, it's a concern for me, definitely. I mean, it's like how much money do you have to throw into this, and how long do you have to wait?
That might be part of it, I guess, of like, Civ 5 was fine on launch, and then the expansions made it so much better. Everyone was just like, oh, that game sucked on launch.
Right,
Maybe that's part of it.
Yeah.
So Jared, I have a question for you. If you've got the Civ games going all the way back, which one is your favorite Civ? Like, what would you put at the top?
You know, so I played Civ 1 and Civ 2 a ton. And like, I was single and didn't have kids, and that made it a lot easier.
I'd imagine.
And then like Civ 3, I'd taken a break for a long time. Actually, it was a long time before Civ 3 came out, right? And I don't know that I ever really got into Civ 3 as much. Civ 4, I played a fair amount, and basically realized, like, after losing a few weekends to it, where you're like, your family's like, "Hey, Dad, you coming out of your computer room?" I realized, like, I just got to cut back the playing of Civ. It's a really, really bad, just one more turn time sink.
Yeah.
And so, I in some respects, I think Civ 2 was my favorite, but I really did like Civ 4. Civ 5 felt like more of the same, like it wasn't a huge change, at least to me, and I didn't play it enough to really get into the nuances. Beyond Earth, I played like 2 games, and that was it, so shame on me.
Beyond Earth didn't hold my attention very much ever, but I tweeted about this earlier today. The Civ series just seems to be so divisive in like which one is each person's favorite. Like I saw comments where people were like, every other Civ game is a good Civ game, so all the odd numbers are good and all the even numbers are bad. But that would imply to me that Civ 4 was a bad game, and I have some of the fondest memories of Civ 4. And simultaneously, I saw someone else say Civ 2 is the best game. Civ 5 totally screwed it up and dumbed down Civ 4. Like, everyone has their own tastes about, like, which Civ game they like.
Yeah, I mean, I remember playing a ton of Civ 2 and really, really enjoying it. I mean, it was, obviously not as many features. I don't know, but there was something very satisfying. It was a very satisfying game.
Mm-hmm.
Civ 2 to me felt like the biggest change, like, in the series. Like, Civ 1 was the first one, and it was good for its time. Civ 2 was, like, better at everything, it felt like. And there wasn't, like, a controversy. I don't recall a controversy where people were like, "Oh, but they ruined this part." Everything else after Civ 2, there's always people who say, "Well, this got better, but this got worse." And, I in that sense, Civ 2 was kind of like the highlight for me.
It's an interesting direction they're going with Civ 6, though, because they released Civ 4, which was one of the more complex Civ games. I feel like maybe I'm wrong about that because I didn't play the 1, 2, or 3 very much. But Civ 4 was definitely the most complex since Civ 4, if that makes sense. Like, 5 has been simpler than it. Beyond Earth has been simpler than it. But they came out with Civ 4, and then they made Civilization Revolution, which, for the record, I freaking love Civilization Revolution. Like, I might get jumped on for that, but there was a summer when that came out where I would the games were only like 6 hours long. A match was 6 hours, and so I would just sit down and I would play a match of Civ in the morning and then, like, get on with my day. And
6 hours later.
yeah, 6 hours later, but it was summer, okay?
Before you had kids, also. Yeah.
Well, luckily, don't have kids yet. Sorry, Jared.
More time for games.
I'm sure they're the loves of your life. I'm just excited to binge some Civ later when it comes out.
That's right. I had to kick them out of the house for this show. So they're not running around. Otherwise they would want to get on the camera and say hi.
Well, maybe next time you're on, we can have that happen. I'm just imagining them, like, sitting outside, like, literally you've kicked them out of the house and they're, like, sitting with an iPad in the backyard.
They're with my wife. It was funny. We had a work conference call for Maximum PC at one point, and I went outside to get my other son from the bus, and left this headset sitting on my laptop, powered on with our chat still going. And Caleb gets on there, puts it on, and just starts yelling his name, Caleb.
It's like a Pokemon.
I got on my phone, and all of a sudden he, like, gets on. I'm like, "Oh no, Caleb, get off!" And he's like, "Caleb." He's like 4, and he thought that was the best thing ever. So that's awesome. That's why I don't let him on the show.
Oh, well, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not entirely opposed to that happening. So. There you go.
Sounds pretty great.
But let's jump along from Civ. I'm very, very excited for Civ, but it doesn't come out till October So
That's good. I feel like I have enough to do for a little bit.
yeah,
So I'm good.
a 5-month break.
Yeah, I could use it.
Let's talk about graphics cards again, because we touched on this a little bit beforehand. Nvidia announced just this past Friday night the GTX 1080 and the GTX 1070. They sent both of us. I want to show this off real quick before we jump into the actual graphics cards. We both have this terrifying thing, which is you can't see really. It's like a metal die-cut triangle that is like a marketing thing from Nvidia. But they sent this one. You got that one at the event, Jared. You got yours at the event. We got ours in the mail before the event. So it doesn't have any Nvidia branding on it. It just says order of 10, and it was like this weird PR thing. But this thing is razor sharp.
Yeah.
Like, you could cut yourself on it really easily, and it looks like a ninja star. So we got sent
a big one.
Yeah, we got sent this in the mail, and we were like, "What the hell is this?"
Pretty heavy too. I mean, it's substantial.
I got it at the show, and mine actually does have Nvidia in the bottom corner. But
yeah,
like there was order of 10 stuff around, and I was like, is this a new company? Like, and then all of a sudden, like I figured out, I'm like, oh, the GeForce 10 series.
It's so sharp. It's like scary sharp.
You should throw it at the wall right now, see if you can make it stick.
The thing is, I'm not going to, because it would.
Yeah.
I'll throw it at Will.
No. So
should we do an unboxing, a live unboxing?
If you'd like, yeah. If you haven't opened
Check
it
this
yet.
out. So I have done this.
Okay.
You took the top off.
Broken the seal on the graphics card.
That looks like a big card too.
It's the same size as like the 980 Ti.
Okay.
So, yeah, where's the...
Yeah, so everyone's spamming the Illuminati symbol in the chat right now.
They're
yes,
right.
You are
yes.
correct.
Because, yeah, I mean, to get that thing in the mail, and it's clearly... Ooh.
It's alive.
I like the new design of the reference cards.
Yeah, I thought it looked cool. Some people were like, "Oh, it looks so chintzy." I'm like, no, it actually looks really nice. It looks, they added some geometric designs. It's a sharp-looking card, and I have to say, like, I handle graphics cards all the time, swapping them in and out of systems. Having the metal backplate on here, like, I really liked that on the 980, and I'm glad they brought it back because I actually broke a capacitor on one of my 290X cards at one point, and it killed it. Like, they're like this big, and one of them broke off, and I didn't even notice it. And then all of a sudden, it's like it stopped working. So I called the company for RMA, and I sent it in, and they sent it back, and they're like, "You've got physical damage. You're hosed."
Oh,
wow.
Yeah.
So,
That's rough.
Yeah, that was a card I bought too with my own money. Bitcoin mining, sweet. So should we talk about some details and go into
yeah. So tell us about the card, because the stat that I heard from the night of the presentation was that the GTX 1080 was twice the power of a Titan X, a third of the power consumption, and half the price.
No, there's so they did a couple of slides. Teraflops. They told us the teraflops. Titan X at peak GPU boost, so not base clock, but when it's running full tilt, is 7 teraflops. The 1080 will be 9 teraflops, so it's about 30. I think it's like 38%. I'd have to pull out a calculator to tell you the exact number. It's either 38 or 28% faster. That's theoretical. Memory bandwidth. Because this is GDDR5X, it's running at 10 gigahertz effective instead of 7 gigahertz. So again, it's like a solid 35-ish% boost to performance. So right there, it tells you if nothing else has really changed, it should be about 30 to 35% faster. Now, they haven't gone into the details of what exactly has gone on architecturally, but they've done some things for VR I guess they did they did an enhanced version of simultaneous multi-projection, which is, the idea is like you've got two eyes that are rendering a scene in VR, and you can do some clever tricks to basically render less detail in the corners, because the corners are going to get like crunched and warped when it goes to display on your VR screen. And so they pre-warp those corners, and they were doing this with Maxwell too, but they're apparently doing it better with the Pascal architecture. And so the deal is, they say in VR it is up to twice as fast as a Titan X and 3 times the efficiency. So the TDP for the 1080 is 180 watts. TDP for Titan X is 250 watts. So they've reduced power consumption by almost a third, which means they've effectively increased their efficiency by a good chunk.
That's cool.
And so a lot of the efficiency increase comes simply because they've gone from 28 nanometer manufacturing down to 16 nanometer FinFET. FinFET is all about reducing power use. It helps solve the issue of leaky transistors that use power even when they're not doing anything. So AMD's got FinFET coming in Polaris. Nvidia's got FinFET now with the Pascal chips. Intel was the first to do FinFET in a production thing with Clearback with Ivy Bridge, their 22 nanometer chip. So FinFET's been around a little bit, but not in graphics cards until now. And it's a huge jump. So they shrank the process node a big step. They got FinFET in there, and effectively they could double performance. Now, here's getting into the more of the technical details.
Wait,
Pascal,
that wasn't technical?
Yeah, Pascal GP100 is their big Pascal. That's in their supercomputers that are coming out. And it's 15-point-something billion transistors. The chip itself is probably about the same size as the GM200, the chip that's in the Titan X. With GTX 1080, the GP104 or whatever they're calling it, they chose to not increase the transistor count a lot. So it's like, I'm trying to remember if it's 7.3, 7.6 billion transistors. It's actually less transistors than a Titan X, more transistors than a GTX 980. But because of the process shrink, it ends up being a chip that's probably half the size, which means it's a lot cheaper to manufacture than a 980 or a 980 Ti. So that's the huge benefit of this 16 nanometer FinFET, and it totally leaves the door open for about a year from now. You can pretty much mark your calendars. NVIDIA's going to do a 1080 Ti or a Titan P or whatever they want to call it, and they're going to use a bigger chip with 15 billion transistors or something, and it's going to be 50% faster than the 1080 and all that stuff. So just put that on the calendar. A year from now, we're going to see a bigger, faster chip from NVIDIA.
It's pretty cool.
It's just crazy to me. Like, thank you for that detailed break. No. Thank you for the detailed breakdown, because I think people definitely appreciate it. This is a much less technical response, but it's just insane to me that they can just be like, oh yeah, we can make what we were making before, but significantly better in every way and basically the same or less money. Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah, the cost is really appealing.
And they showed clock speeds too. So this was overclocked. They showed the reference design, the Founders Edition, running overclocked, and they said this was not a specially binned chip. Now, you can take that with a grain of salt if you want, but I tend to trust them because I've tested a lot of NVIDIA cards, and they all tend to overclock pretty well. And they had the reference card overclocked to 2.1 gigahertz. Now, by comparison, the stock clock on a 980 is like 1.1 gigahertz, and it overclocks to like 1.4. So clock speed alone, they've shot up like 50%.
It's just crazy. It's like, so the question that I came away with from this is, does that just mean that the 980 Ti and the 970 and the Titan X, are they just like obsolete? Did they obsolete their own line of cards? Because they're cheaper for stronger.
You don't go out and buy a Titan X now. I mean, like, there's certain groups that might, and they're not gamers. They're supercomputing or doing something where they require like that level of. I don't even know that they would even buy it anymore though with the 1080, but they might. Anyway, Titan X does have a few things that it might be better at in theory. In practice, I think everyone would want the 1080. And to buy a second Titan X now, even if you could get it for $600, it's like, oh man, that'd be really tough. But Titan X's still sell on eBay for well north of $600. So, Yeah, it's they're not something that you'd go out and buy now, but if you have them, this is probably going to be 20-30% faster than a Titan X, and that's not the end of the world. Titan X still works well for 4K at high detail gaming, and so I'm drifting.
Got some drift.
Oh,
going
that's
on.
my fault.
Some
Excuse
Tokyo
me.
drift.
I'll get you back. Don't worry.
No worries.
Let's have a conversation about Skype's UI.
Titan X is still fast. I think for most people, like outside of guys like me who review hardware, they are best off skipping a generation or two of hardware. So, like if you've got a 780, going to the 1080 is going to be huge. If you've got a 980, it's going to be big. If you've got a 980 Ti, it's going to be like, you would have to really be dedicated to living on the cutting edge of technology to go out and, ditch your 980 Ti and buy 1080s just so that you can have the extra 30% performance. And people will do it, right? But they're not your casual gamers. They're guys who they've got tons of money. They're like, yeah, I'm willing to go spend $2,000 to have the ultimate gaming PC.
Yeah, God. So, first of all, real quick, Tuck Dog in the chat just subscribed. Thank you very much. You are a longtime listener, I know, so thank you for subscribing.
Yay.
When are we going to start expecting like benchmarks? When are we going to start figuring out whether what they say is really what's happening?
What Tom's really asking is, what are you doing this afternoon?
I can tell you, but then I'd have to kill you.
Okay.
No, the launch date for the 1080 is May 27th. So
okay. I thought it was actually June. So cool.
No,
that's really soon.
The 1080 is May 27th. The 1070 is June 10th. So
Gotcha.
Pretty much, they're going to launch their more expensive card first, get the early adopters, and then the one that almost certainly we're going to be like, hey, it's like Titan X levels of performance for $370 or $380. That'll be the 1070.
Jesus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to think about, right? Like
Yeah.
the 980 Ti was a $650 card, which was pretty much as fast as the Titan X. I mean, it's like 2 or 3% slower at best. But now you're going to get that same level of performance for under $400.
It's so crazy.
It's nice to see that we'll be paying less. I mean, that it's not just a faster card at the same price. I mean, that's what's crazy. That's what's really appealing.
Yeah.
Price.
I feel kind of like bummed out. We talked about this earlier this week, Jared, that I got a 970 in December, and it was a gift from my family. But I got a 970 in December, and now in a month, in a month, it's pointless that I got it. I mean, not pointless because it's still a great card. It's just so silly.
Yeah. I'm actually about a year overdue to upgrade my graphics card, so that's exciting for me.
So the real question that everyone has and we can't answer is, what will you actually pay for these cards in late May, early June? And so there's the Founders Edition, which is the reference card, and the 1080 Founders Edition is $700. It's $100 more. It's not overclocked. It's not specially binned. It's nothing other than a Founders Edition.
Right.
The reason it's more expensive, pretty much, in my mind, is because Nvidia doesn't want to irritate their add-in board partners like Asus and EVGA and Zotac and whatever. So they priced it higher in order to not compete directly. But at launch, what will we see? And I think we'll see a lot of Founders Editions. I'm not sure we'll see many non-Founders Editions. And the question is, will we actually see cards at that $600 MSRP? I wouldn't be surprised if there's only a few and they're gone really quickly and it takes a month before you can find them in stock. That kind of happened with the 970 and the 980, right? The 970 was hard to find in stock if you wanted, like EVGA was constantly sold out for the first couple of months after launch the 970.
Yeah, because the prices that they listed of $380 for the 1070 and $600 for the 1080, those are just the recommended prices, right?
Right.
And that's also one of the reasons that if you look at our previous favorite graphics card, the MSI card, I believe it is, or no, is Asus or MSI the gaming 4G 970?
I'm pretty ambivalent on which 970 you select these days. I'm like, they're all they're all so close to each other. I'm like, you have to really get into the nitty gritty to be like, oh yeah, this one's like a 93% and this one's a 92%. It's like, whatever, they're all good. So if you were buying a 970 2 months ago, I was like, just go and buy whichever one's cheapest, unless you really want a factory overclock, because the extra $30 for a moderate factory overclock that you can match on your own, to me, it wasn't really worthwhile. But MSI and Asus, they both got boards that are good. I kind of, I like the blowers actually, and finding a 970 blower is hard because they exhaust heat out of your system rather than into the case and letting the case fans deal with it. So that's one thing that the Founders Edition does have going for it, is if you like blowers and you want to run SLI, that's not a bad route to go, and you might be willing to pay a bit more for them.
Right. Well, it'll be interesting to see, like you said, how it pans out in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. Can I say my one big complaint about it, though? So marketing-wise, I mean,
it's gonna be the name.
Yeah. So you got your 980, your 970, and the obvious next step was 1080, which feels really dated right now. Oh, look, we've got our 1080 card, and it feels like 2 years ago or something that would have been like, fuck yeah, literally just got the name. But now it's like I want my 4K. And
they should have just jumped to the GTX 1440 or something like that.
Because then the other thing is that 1080 does sound kind of cool. 1070 sounds really dumb because like that's not an aspect ratio. Nobody's playing games at 1070. And obviously that's not the full thing where the name comes from. It's just kind of a happy coincidence. But Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So I got to make a comment here. Apparently, some people are doubting who my editor-in-chief, Tuan Nguyen, he's the Maximum PC editor-in-chief. He is in chat. His name is GX Solus. So if you're doubting that's who he is, that is, in fact, Tuan. He's the guy who did like the crazy headset roundup, and he's got like 23 mid-range or budget headsets that he just posted on.
He would never make the mistake I made and put his headset on backwards. That's correct.
Like the testing equipment he got for headsets is crazy. Have you guys seen that article on it? It's
I'll post
like
the link in chat as well.
$50,000 or $100,000 worth of equipment and software.
Jesus, yeah.
He takes it a little bit seriously.
Yes, if you like the term audiophile, he is an audiophile. If you think that's pretentious and stupid, he's just someone who really, really cares about audio and knows enough to talk about it. Me, I am not that guy.
And I'm
about graphics.
we'll get Tuan on the show one day as well, so that'll be fun.
So if instead of wearing these like backwards, what if it was just upside down, like it is just like this?
That's a whole nother set of problems.
Yeah.
Did you guys ever have the Future provided headsets that were all, I won't say the brand, but they were like a vice clamp on your head?
Yeah, they go like this. I mean, it felt like the dude from Empire Strikes Back at Cloud City, who's got like the thing.
Yeah, they go behind your head like that.
But then they like pull and fall off. Yeah. Yeah.
They were terrible.
That was very nice of you not to mention the brand.
They sent me one, like they're like, oh hey, you need a headset here. Alex, my coworker, sent me one, and I texted him when I got it. I'm like, what did I do to do you hate me? Like, why would you put my head in this thing?
And they're one of those ones with a combined mic and headphone all going through one jack.
If I could remember the brand, I would say it, because honestly, I hate those headphones, man.
That much.
And I think is this what Anthony is saying, SteelSeries?
It's an old SteelSeries.
Okay, yeah. Because that's the crazy thing is, I love
like
SteelSeries headphones. I really like SteelSeries headphones, and those headphones are awful. They're just
bad.
Abysmal.
But yeah, I mean, the headset I use at home and really enjoy is SteelSeries, but Jesus, those behind the head ones.
I should run upstairs and pull them on here just so you can.
Yeah, I've still got them in my desk, kind of as a joke.
You're welcome to do that while we move on to our next topic. Yeah. Will, you were naming, you were talking about a name problem. This is a game that I can't remember who it was over in the UK was calling out the name of. Battlefield 1 was announced on Friday.
I fucking love that name.
Well,
I think
really?
it's great.
God, it's such an Xbox problem. I mean, we already went through this with everyone being like, "Oh yeah, the Xbox One." Oh, you mean the original Xbox or the Xbox? And they're going to come out with like the Xbox One 2. Like, what are you going to do after Battlefield 1? There's going to be a new Battlefield game in 2 years. Like, what are you going
Battlefield
to call
2,
it?
and it'll be World War II.
Oh God.
So
I can't think
Nvidia
of
at their
anything less
event
clear.
on Friday night, they actually, like, one of their guys, Tom Peterson, he's like, yeah, we got like Battlefield 5 coming out, and everyone's like, Battlefield 1, yelling out, and he's like, what? They called it Battlefield 1? Like, he totally does this full on, like, that's so stupid. I mean, great name.
Yeah.
Woo! Yeah, but let's talk about the actual game. I'll pull up some shots from this too because it's got some really cool images for the game. Battlefield 1 officially announced, got a little leaked on Friday afternoon, but then officially announced with this really beautiful cinematic trailer.
Some leakage.
It's set in World War I. It's from the leaked image that first got it shown, it was like a guy in front of a Zeppelin with a cape and and a mace, and everyone thought it was kind of maybe alternate reality World War I, but apparently it's just a very stylized World War I. It's a lot of bright colors, a lot of horseback riding and planes and flamethrowers all together in the same game. And I saw the trailer, and they didn't show any gameplay. They showed all in-engine footage, right? Which is just the most deceptive thing you can do for marketing.
Because what does that mean? Yeah.
It's just like for anybody at home who ever believes that in-engine footage is representative at all of a game, it's really not. It's not representative of what the game is going to look like when you're playing it.
We made our engine render this really beautiful cinematic. Okay, that's cool. Cool that you can do that. Yeah.
But Battlefield 1 got announced. What did you guys think of it? I really, really enjoyed the trailer. I thought that the concept and the direction, I was really interested in it.
Yeah, I really, as a video guy, I thought the trailer was really well put together. I mean, it was engaging. They did a great job. It showcased a lot of cool stuff, but also cinematically, it was very cool. Which is funny because I also around the same time watched the Call of Duty trailer, which is kind of a cool concept. There's some cinematically, but just didn't feel crisp in the same way. And there's sort of this joke going around that everybody's up. Well, I guess you don't call it upvoting on YouTube. Shows my shows my allegiance there for a second. But everybody's giving a thumbs up to the Battlefield trailer and a thumbs down to the Call of Duty trailer, and to the point where it's sort of like, okay, yeah, so some people didn't like the Call of Duty trailer, but it's sort of become this joke. So they've reached 1 million downvotes for Call of Duty and 1 million up.
Wow.
Again, I'm calling it upvotes and downvotes, but whatever.
Thumbs
you know
up
what
and
I mean?
thumbs
Yeah.
down.
Which is pretty funny. But yeah, the trailer, I thought the trailer was gorgeous.
Yeah. But go ahead, Jared.
So the interesting thing is, like, my wife, she gets into these like historical dramas. She was a history major, and so she loved Downton Abbey. We just were watching, like, for the past couple of weeks, BBC's is it BBC? Yeah, BBC Crimson Fields, which is set in World War I. So, like, I've been like watching all these drama things about World War I, and all of a sudden it's like Battlefield 5 set now, Battlefield 1 set in World War I. And I was like, oh wow, that's interesting. Having watched that drama, I'm like, I can see where people are like, this feels very alternate reality. Like, there's some stuff going on that kind of feels like, yeah, I'm not sure that was really how World War I was. But I'm excited to see it. I mean, like, it's crazy, like the history and the things that happened in World War I. Like, first time we really used, the flamethrowers and poison gases and things like that. But poison gas was not actually that effective. There's a history fact for you.
I would love if this game came out and it was just the most depressing trench warfare game like you've ever played. And all the color was just this huge red herring, and it was just all trenches. I would be all
great.
about it.
That would be really funny. I mean, even if it was to the point where, like, you've got your classic authors and stuff writing poetry. There's this whole, like, movement after World War I of, like, these, I don't know, it would be great just to have players really get into it.
But Tyler wrote a piece for the site, jumping back to the Call of Duty thing. Tyler wrote a great piece, I think, on PCGamer.com, which is on the front page right now, called "In Defense of Call of Duty," where he basically wrote about how the Call of Duty series is stupid and we should make fun of it, but it's just dumb fun, and there's a place for it, and people are going to make fun of it and mock it, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's like pointless. It's not useless to gaming, and it's also the most popular shooting series in existence. The thing that's the difference to me, because I think you're right that the thumbs upping and thumbs down is just kind of the internet echo chamber. It's funny to do this at this point, right? I don't think. But when I look at the Call of Duty Infinite Warfare trailer, like I said last week, it just kind of made me go, okay. Like, I wasn't excited about it. I didn't dislike it. I didn't think the trailer was bad. But when you just said Call of Duty with spaceships, I was just kind of like, cool, spaceships. And that's all I felt about it. Whereas this trailer with Battlefield, they were like Call of Duty, but Battlefield, but in World War I with horses and biplanes. And I was like, that sounds really cool. Like,
well, what's the best Battlefield game in your opinion so far?
I was a huge fan of Bad Company 2. That was the one I played the most of. I haven't played all of the Battlefield games, so I'm not sure. I also played. I'm a weirdo though, because I did play 2142 and really liked that as well.
See, I played 1942. The first one so much, and again, I got kids and family that kind of pulled me away from playing as much multiplayer later. But I know there's a lot of people that are like, hey, 1942 was the best one. And so I can see a lot of people who are of that opinion being like, oh, this will be awesome going to World War I now. It's like going back to the roots and getting away from the high technology into more, primitive fighting.
Yeah, it'll be cool what they do.
It'll be interesting to see how they balance stuff, though, too, because, I mean, as a war, there was a lot of imbalance. I mean, not all the sides of World War I had access to the same technology. And you have these technologies that are popping up sort of as the war is progressing, becoming more prevalent in certain areas and stuff. So, I mean, the trailer shows, a bunch of people on horseback with swords, which was part of the war. And so that'll be really interesting to see how cavalry works out. What I hope is that when they first release it, there's a bunch of really ridiculous imbalance stuff. So like horses can just freaking own tanks. Like you got like these machine guns on the side of your horse or whatever, or they're just totally indestructible, and you're just, I mean I think of like, horse bugs in games like Skyrim and stuff where you can like go straight up the side of a mountain basically and stuff like that. And it's just, there's a potential for there to be a lot of hilarious balanced stuff with that.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting. I mean, I was looking at the comments on our article on the site, and somebody was saying, because reading those comments is always fun, but somebody was saying one of their concerns is everybody's just going to pick the guy with the machine gun. So how are you going to balance that with these bolt rifles? Not even bolt sniper rifles, but just basically muskets.
I mean, other games have already, like Verdun is a World War I game that is very bleak in trench warfare, but I hear great things about. I haven't played myself, so there have already been games to tackle this problem, and I think one of the things is. Jared, you can maybe comment on this a little more, but I think machine guns, there were no assault rifles.
Right.
No, it was mostly mounted stuff. So like
exactly,
it was totally like the defenders had a huge advantage initially over anyone attacking, and that was the problem. Was like at the start of the war, they would throw numbers at a defensive position, and the machine gun would just mow them down. And so it took them a few years to actually figure out better tactics and things to do. And tanks. The first tanks kind of got created in World War I, but a lot of them got stuck in the mud. But they got better as it went along. And I was looking at the trailer, and like the tank in Battlefield 1's trailer, that to me looks very much like a World War II tank more than a World War I tank. But I'm not a history major, so maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there were tanks like that.
I thought that too. I mean, it looked pretty impressive for a World War I tank. But
like the first tanks were literally like, hey, we're going to take this little beat up truck and we're going to stick some armor on it and we're going to send it out there and see how it does.
Yeah, I mean, and so obviously there's ways for them to balance all of this stuff too. I mean, our one of our video editors, Ben, was saying he hopes that there's a mechanic for peeing on machine guns, because that was something that they had to do to keep the machine guns from overheating. A lot of times you'd have these guys in the trenches in World War I, who would actually you'd pee on it to keep it from getting too hot. So that would be, I just love that idea of that as like one of the engineer's functions, is, just unzipping.
So you have to drink a lot of water as an engineer so that you can pee on the machine gun?
Exactly, yeah. But overheating mechanics or something like that, I can see them balancing it.
I'm just really excited. This was mentioned in the chat real quick, but I'm also really excited for bolt-action rifles to come back in like a multiplayer setting.
Yeah.
One of my favorite games I actually played, and I don't know what the public opinion about this game is. I really enjoyed Call of Duty 2 Big Red One, which was a Treyarch developed like spin-off Call of Duty. And one of my favorite memories of that game was like the bolt-action rifle in it. Mm-hmm. It was, I believe, I'm 90% sure it was World War II. And I miss that kind of, that bolt action. You have to take your shots correctly, but it's not a sniper rifle. I really enjoyed that type of gunplay. And I'm interested to see what they do. They very clearly, like what you were saying before, don't want it to be trench warfare. They want it to be planes and zeppelins and horses. If you can't fly a zeppelin, I'm out.
I don't know how, like, Zeppelins, I'm like, how'd those work? Like, how will they work in Battlefield 1? Because I'm like, well, can't you just start, like, shooting up at them and, like, bring them down? But maybe not.
No, because it's been said that they are destructible. So I think from what I've gathered, the Germans will have access to Zeppelins and the U.S. will have access to battleships. And both will be these sort of mammoth vehicles that are destructible but take a lot to destroy. And
weren't Zeppelins primarily just like reconnaissance in World War I though? Like they weren't an offensive weapon per se.
Yeah, but that's no fun.
Yeah, I'm gonna like drop bombs out of my Zeppelin.
Yeah,
I'm talking like instead of helicopters being the transport unit, just Zeppelins.
Just Zeppelins, just very
100%.
slowly.
Oh yeah.
Like, all right, we could have walked there by now, but no,
and the wind blows the wrong direction. So you're going the wrong way.
Even an out of bounds signal flashing. It's like, damn it.
That would be great.
Let's jump along. But last thoughts on Battlefield is I'm interested to see what they do with it. I'm glad that they're going kind of a stylized route with the World War I rather than anything grim.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't bother me too much. I mean, I think there's a place for super grim World War I games, and hopefully there's a little atmosphere, obviously, because we like atmosphere in our games. But yeah, that doesn't bother me too much. I'm excited. I haven't really played the other Battlefield games much, so this is the first time I've been like, okay, yeah.
Workster says
war never changes.
Yeah. Workster says, how do you repair Zeppelins, though? And I just got this great image of, like, someone as an engineer class with, like, just little pliers on the outside of a Zeppelin, like its health bar going up.
You have to pee on it.
Oh, yes, of course, of course.
Did it have duct tape back then?
No, this is pre-duct tape,
was
isn't it?
I thought maybe. I don't know.
Maybe, I don't know when duct tape was.
I'm Googling that, but while I Google that, let's move right along to PlanetSide 2. I am excited to talk about PlanetSide 2, and it's weird that I'm excited to talk about PlanetSide 2.
It's not weird to me, but if it's weird to you, I guess that's fine. I talk about PlanetSide 2 all the time, so tell us about duct tape.
Duct tape was
careful, you're knocking your
originally
glass
invented
over.
in 1902.
Oh, they had duct tape.
But I believe it wasn't like widely sold until like World War II. It was used for other things until then.
Yeah.
Duct tape, the only thing, fun fact about duct tape, the only thing duct tape isn't good at is taping ducts. Because because
it'll dry
melts.
out.
It can't take heat. So if you actually use it on ducts and the ducts get hot, the duct tape fails. So it can do everything else, but it can't do that.
That is pretty
Tom's fun facts about duct tape.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I've never tried to duct a duct.
So what's duct tape like in PlanetSide 2?
It's great. Just like everything in PlanetSide 2.
So
no,
PlanetSide,
that's not true.
PlanetSide 2, been around for a long time. You play it a
Over
lot.
3 years.
But it just got a big update that added construction to the game.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
So PlanetSide 2, it's been around for a while, obviously. One of the cool things is they kind of follow a little bit of the MMO update kind of thing. Like they periodically have to add content to kind of keep players interested. But I think they do a pretty good job at it. And so this most recent update is probably the biggest since they added a completely new server, or not server, but a completely new play area about a year ago. And it's sort of the biggest thing since then. So to really explain construction, I have to kind of like take it back to why I like PlanetSide so much. As opposed to similar games like Battlefield or, Arma, or sort of these large player tactical first-person shooters. And the big appeal is you have these giant land masses that you play on. So it's sort of like if you were to take all the different maps in Battlefield and stick them on one continent, and you could just walk between them. So like, okay, I'm tired fighting over this area. I'm just gonna, jump in a tank and drive over to this other area. So it's all interconnected. I mean, there's a couple different continents, but they're each huge. So what's fun is massive lands, massive battlefields, and a massive number of players. I mean, each land continent can take up to, I think, 2,000 players, but they might have limited that a little bit. But what's exciting about that, you're fighting over these different bases, and if you take control of the points at that base and you hold them for enough time, the base becomes yours, and your troops can start spawning there. So it's this very sort of dynamic, shifting map. You're capturing territory, you're losing territory. But what's exciting is there's a vehicle that allows you to spawn troops. And so what the game becomes about on a more meta level is placing these spawn vehicles at strategic locations around the map so that you can attack enemy bases, so you can flank and push their lines, because you die pretty quickly in PlanetSide. I mean, you don't have a ton of health, so, unless you're like super MLG jumping all over the place and, getting your headshots or whatever, you're going to die and respawn a lot. And the respawning happens really fast, so it's like not that big a deal. But so it sort of becomes all about pushing these battle lines back and forth. And you do that with these Sunderers, these buses that spawn players. And so and that's what sort of makes it unique and exciting, because you can get these interactions over bases that are completely unique because of where you've set up these spawn areas. And that creates player-made objectives. So let's say I drive one of these right up to an enemy base, all these allied troops are spawning from it. My enemy suddenly has this objective that they didn't have before, which is destroy that vehicle. And that's the only way they're going to defend their base, is by destroying that vehicle. So we're protecting it while also attacking a base. So it's very cool dynamic. What the construction system adds is basically player-made bases, and it's all about like generating these victory points so that you can take control of a whole continent, which is such a high level of meta that the average player doesn't think too much about it, which is a complaint. It's a legit complaint that the average player isn't that involved in the meta. But what it does do is allows for very dynamic conflict that is always a little different. You can set up your base, your player-made base, anywhere between the existing bases. So suddenly you have like, oh, this giant bridge is completely blocked by a fort in the center of it, where before you could just drive your tank across it. So that's pretty exciting. It's pretty cool to see people kind of try things out, and that's brought a lot of the player base back to the game. A lot of people worry that PlanetSide has died, and what is it going to do? I don't think it's ever really died. I think they've done a good job of adjusting gameplay so that there's always sort of a player base going. But this has definitely brought a lot of people in. I think the numbers are as high as when the game first launched, which is great. So super fun to be playing right now.
It's important to note that Daybreak, the developers who used to be SOE, Sony Online Entertainment, they've kept EverQuest alive still.
That's true.
So like they can keep a game alive. They can keep online games even with small, like perceptibly small player bases.
Right.
They've figured out a way to make games live on through small player bases.
Right.
Obviously, I say that after them having just recently announced that EverQuest Next was canceled.
Right.
But that game wasn't even out yet. You know.
Well, and it's interesting too because you take a game like EverQuest, which, I mean, it's an MMO. The difference with PlanetSide though is that you don't have a story. The content is the other players you're playing with. So if it's just me, there's nothing for me to do. But if you suddenly have a whole squad you're playing with, or a bunch of allies and there's a bunch of enemies, then suddenly you've got content, and that sort of creates an interesting problem for them because they can't let it dip below a certain amount or it just will be boring. But I think they've done a good job. I mean, they run into problems. I mean, the sort of most exciting thing about the most recent update isn't the construction system for me. It's faction population limiting. So now you can't, if your faction has, I think, 10% more population on a continent than the other factions, you can't spawn on that continent. You have to enter a queue, and then you can eventually spawn. And that's made a huge difference.
Yeah.
That's made it so that the fights are a lot more balanced. One of the big complaints about PlanetSide, which is totally legit, is that sometimes you'll just get these Zerg fests where the momentum of a bunch of random players playing together, just pushing base to base, sort of snowballs, and there's not much you can do to stop that unless a Zerg on another team runs into that Zerg, and so suddenly you have these two massive armies just kind of running into each other. But this has helped mitigate that a little bit. And they've done some things with the respawn functions that help mitigate that as well. But yeah, I'd say over the last couple of weeks, I've had some of the most fun I've had playing PlanetSide in like a year or two. So.
One of our subscribers, Chris86 in the chat, asked, how's the player base now? You said it's grown back to its kind of starting numbers, but I'm curious also about how has the player base, like, is it a friendly community? Is it easy to jump in and just kind of like figure out where you're at?
Yeah. Those are two different questions because it's easy to jump in and figure out where you're at in terms of the player base. In terms of the game, they've added a lot of like functionality for new players and kind of tutorial stuff that leads you through, but I still think they could do a lot of work on that. The community is good, I think. I think the key thing is there's some really vocal people on Reddit and on YouTube who advocate for the game and for the community and have some really great tutorial videos and stuff like that. And that's really cool to see player-made tutorials. Like, hey, you're just starting out. How do you spend your first in-game currency? Like, should you buy a new gun or should you upgrade one of your, classes or one of your vehicles, that kind of thing. Is the other big complaint about the game is it's free to play. And so, of course, if something's free to play, the complaint is always that it's pay to win. The nice thing about PlanetSide is there isn't anything in-game that you can buy with real money that you can't also earn. So the sort of defense against the pay-to-win argument is that if you're paying money to play the game, you're really just paying to get things a little bit faster, which I can see as a legit complaint against it. But the other thing is that all the starting weapons are freaking awesome.
Yeah. So I have another question.
Yeah.
there's 3 factions?
There are
Is that
3
right?
factions.
And they're
yeah.
like they're actually taking over territory on this global map, right?
Right.
So you told me once that you have a character in every faction.
Yes.
So that you can kind of always jump in on whatever side you want.
Yeah, it's
But-
fun to check things out, you know.
Is there ever sort of like an EVE Online-esque metagame where people get really passionate about their factions and organize pushes together? Or like,
yeah.
is there some sort of mastermind head of each faction that like decides where they're going to attack next?
I would say a small council.
Okay.
Have there
To
been
take
any
it to Game of
serious
Thrones.
betrayals, though? Like
Not
that's kind of the thing for Eve, right? There's been
Yeah.
some huge
Yeah.
betrayals.
in the community, it's sort of frowned upon to be the kind of person that like is, you know, let's say I'm playing TR, the red guys, Terran Republic. If I'm playing them, but then, you know, the enemy's attacking from a certain direction, but we can't figure out where they're spawning from, it's pretty frowned upon for me to switch to the purple guys, the Vanu Sovereignty, see where they're coming from, and then switch back and blow it up. Or stay, you know, because I could switch to the other team and go throw a bunch of C4 because there's team damage. So I could throw a bunch of C4 on one of my allied buses to destroy it and then jump back. So that kind of thing is kind of frowned upon because it kind of breaks up the flow. Like you want your enemies to be attacking because that's what creates the content. So there isn't too much of that. I mean, there definitely are the dramas in the community where, you know, someone who's a long-time new conglomerate player who's, you know, leads one of the big clans or whatever decides that they're fed up with it and switches to another team. But nothing kind of that fits in with the Eve thing. And I think part of that is because you're not buying things in the game that you then are losing. So like you don't have like these resources that you're spending, like, you know, like hundreds of real life dollars that you're spending to buy a spaceship that then, you know, gets stolen or something. So there aren't that kind of interactions as much.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, like, the building thing is really exciting to me. It makes me kind of want to try the game out. It is free to play, right?
It is free to play, which is cool.
Do you have any tips for people who, because I've heard a lot of people now say it's a great time to jump into the game.
Right.
Like, how do you recommend doing that? Do you just say download it and figure it out?
Yeah, I'd say download it. Maybe watch like a YouTube video or two. I mean, there's a great this community guy named Rel who makes some great videos. I think he actually now got picked up by Daybreak, at least on a consulting kind of level. So good for him. But he's done some great videos like on how to spend your first 1,000 in-game points. Basically, he also did a video that's just sort of an intro to the game. You know, it's short. It's like just a couple minutes long, but like here's kind of what's going on. There's a lot going on because unlike a game like Battlefield, you're not just thrown into a lobby. Instead, you're thrown, into a base that's being attacked or that you're attacking. So it's sort of like, okay, what's going on? Obviously, there's these points we want to take, but where are these people coming from? Why am I dying? Whatever.
Because you got shot.
Yeah.
That's
Did you
usually
get
the
wiped
reason.
out as a faction? Like, can a faction get wiped off the map, or is that not like is that kind of disabled? Not
No, that's actually the victory condition right now. Is that you're constantly respawning, so it's not like everybody's dead and so somebody wins, but it's a faction can conquer an entire continent. So there's 4 continents in the game. They're all massive, and they're all slightly different terrain and types of buildings and different strategies for each of them. And I think they each have like 50 different bases, which are, so they're huge. But if you generate enough victory points, which you can do by capturing bases, by capturing special sort of more important types of base, and then also by now building these player bases and protecting them while they generate points. So you can lock out a continent. So yes, you can take over an entire continent. That continent will lock. Nobody can play there until a different continent gets taken over. So that's sort of the big meta. That's the victory condition. But as a player, you're more concerned about like base to base winning and losing. So
Cool.
yeah.
Well, let's thank you for talking about PlanetSide. Let's jump to our Twitch chat Q&A, start taking questions from you guys. Tag us with @PCGamer in the Twitch chat, and we will respond to your questions if you are a subscriber, which are JBJ Blaze. Probably frequent listeners will recognize that name by now, has now resubscribed for 5 months in a row, so thank you very much for that. And if you have any questions about PlanetSide, any of the games we discussed today, the GTX 1080, anything about benchmarking, because Jared can definitely be the man to answer those questions, please let us know. If you are watching on YouTube or listening through iTunes or just PCGamer.com, welcome. Thank you for listening there. And sorry we can't take your questions live here, but you're always welcome to join us at twitch.tv/PCGamer. And if you have any comments for us before or after the fact or questions, you can go to PCGamer.com/podcast for a chronological list of every episode of the show, and you can comment on this week's show there.
Also, I was just
my
gonna
God,
say,
that was
that
amazing.
was crazy. Yeah. Do you have to buy me a Coca-Cola or something?
Yeah, apparently. Just real quick, Kunifu also just resubscribed for the 3rd month.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Got a lot of resubs today.
nice.
I was going to say, also, if you have questions about PlanetSide, feel free to hit me up. Also, if you want to talk shit about PlanetSide, you want to throw down, I'm down for that too, because it is an interesting, there are, I think, a lot of pros to the game. There also are some cons, so that's totally legit.
It's almost like it's not a black and white
I
situation.
know, it's crazy.
My God. Chris86 up top, before I asked for questions, asked any love for Battleborn. That game seems to have it hard. We just released a review of Battleborn, which I will post in the chat. And I think our reviewer, who is a freelancer, basically was like, yeah, it's fun, but it's kind of okay. My opinion of Battleborn, I didn't play it too much, but my opinion of Battleborn was it was like fine, but if it had come out, like 2 years earlier, I would think it was amazing.
Right.
But it's just not in this atmosphere, not with games like Overwatch coming out and Heroes of the Storm and other MOBAs and shooters that I would want to spend my time with more.
We've got Project Blue Streak. What's it called? Lawbreakers is going to come out soon
Lawbreakers,
too.
which Tyler really enjoyed.
Nice.
If you're enjoying Battleborn, I don't doubt it. It was like a fine game, but I just didn't really get into it a lot. It wasn't bad by any means. It's not a bad game. It's just okay.
I think my problem with games like that, and I mean, I'm biased. I'm wearing a Heroes hoodie, but you've got all these MOBAs. You now have a bunch of arena shooters that are class-based or class or character-based. And part of the problem with that is it's a lot of characters to learn. And so, like, if you're playing, like, more than 2 of these games with, like, these huge cast of characters that each have unique abilities, like, to be competitive in a game like Overwatch, you need to know all the characters and you need to know all their abilities so that you can react to them, even if, like I don't really play Hanzo that much, but I know his abilities, And so for me, Battleborn might be totally fun, but it's like another frickin' set of characters that I need to learn. I only have room for 2 or 3 of those.
Let's see. Let's grab some more questions. JBJ Blaze asked, "What do you think?
JBJ.
What do you guys think of Doom? Also, should you get the physical version for the poster, the Steam version for Wolfenstein: The Old Blood? I've heard great things about Wolfenstein, so maybe that way.
I'd go digital.
I'd go digital too. Yeah. Forget the posters. They always just get ripped off the wall eventually.
Yeah, and
Not to mention for the PC version, the physical version of Doom, I believe, is just going to be a code in a box.
with the poster.
So,
Yeah.
that's something to consider. But I haven't played Doom since the closed beta or whatever, the beta that was there. We're not getting early code for it, so we'll be playing it. It's a bummer, and it's a little concerning.
It's always, there's a lot of reasons not to send out code, but it is always like, okay, is this because you're embarrassed about the game? Is it because you're worried about what early press is going to say?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So we'll be playing it on the 13th at the same time as you, if you are getting it, and you'll be able to expect a review next week sometime, probably end of the week. We'll see. We're gonna have to spend some time with the multiplayer and the campaign. I'm more excited for the campaign than the multiplayer. Let's put it that way. I think that the campaign could be fun, and I would just never want to touch the multiplayer. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I used to play Doom, was just the campaign, and it was great.
Yeah,
I remember that. The other thing, though, the thing about the multiplayer, I think one of the YouTube commenters, again, great place to read if you just are looking for something to read YouTube comments. Somebody had said, okay, watch this gameplay video, this multiplayer video. And again, it's from the beta, so I'm sure they've tweaked a bunch. Watch it again, but watch it at like 1.25 speed, and it suddenly feels like an amazing game, as opposed to a kind of lackluster game. So if you're, so it'll be interesting to see if they speed it up a little bit, kind of where that is. Because it's true, I went back and watched the trailer, or not the trailer, but our gameplay session again, faster, and it was like,
I didn't do anything with the Doom beta, but they showed it off at Nvidia's event. And I think that's a later build that was running on Vulkan. And all the comments are like, oh my gosh, they've sped it up so much. So they were all excited about that. So it does sound like maybe id Software has tweaked the speed some in the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, nice. I saw a Reddit thread of somebody on Reddit/r games. And they were talking about how their whatever country they live in doesn't care about street dates, and so they already had the game. And according to their perception as well, the game had been sped up from the beta.
Okay,
so
cool.
That's awesome if that's true. We don't know firsthand yet if that's true, but if id heard criticism and directly responded and made a change to the game because of it, that's great. That's cool.
That's promising for future criticisms too. Very cool. Very cool.
Let's see. There's a lot of questions. I'm sorry if I can't get to everybody. Panzer 2 said he watched Mudbloods on Netflix, and that's embarrassing for me, but thank you for watching it. That's a documentary I'm in, if anybody cares to look it up. Then he also asks, when can we expect a Total War Warhammer review? And also, Hapalupa asks, what are your thoughts on Total War Warhammer?
That'll also be interesting to see from a hardware perspective too, because you're rendering so many units.
Mm-hmm. And they're all really
they're
detailed.
talking about DX12, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of like Ash's, where DX12 can be a super big benefit to them because of the number of units they're throwing on screen.
Yeah.
We got to go talk to them at PAX East in Boston a week or two ago. I have no sense of time anymore because I just play PlanetSide all the time. So it could have been a month ago for all I know. But
it's been a year.
It's been a year. Fuck. We just went to the next PAX East. No, so we got to take a look at the newest, or then was the newest build, and it looks great. I never played a lot of the older Total Wars, but they always seemed really cool. But I love fantasy just as a genre, and it just seems to make sense. This scale and the type of gameplay just makes sense to add the fantasy element in. And it's a video, why not? Why not throw things like Raise Dead so you can raise up more units, and they're super weak and stuff, but pretty cool for overwhelming, a machine gun defense point. No, that's just a callback to when we're talking about Battlefield. But yeah, it looks really cool. I mean, vampire bats. I mean, you get these griffins and I don't know, spells. It seems to make sense. So I'm pumped.
And as for when you can expect the review, as Tyler said in the chat, late next week. Our reviewers already working their way through it. What I imagine is a hefty game to review.
Yeah, I wish I could get my hands on the.
Late next week, our reviewer is already working their way through it. What I imagine is a hefty game to review.
Yeah, I wish I could get my hands on the actual review copy.
There was a good question way earlier. There it is. Varendeel asks, with Microsoft saying that the free upgrades to Windows 10 won't be happening much longer, for those of you not aware, I think it's in June, end of June, is your last...
July 27th, isn't it?
July 27th, or end of July.
That's when it launched, so 1 year.
So once it's been a year from Windows 10's launch, you can no longer upgrade from 7 or 8 for free. You'll have to pay the $100-some for it.
What I'm hoping is that means that the frickin' pop-ups in my Windows 8 will go away. Probably they won't. It'll probably be like, upgrade to Windows 10
you should
for $29.99. Yeah. But
there's...
that's my biggest pet peeve. Like, don't sell me products. I'm like, it's my computer. Leave me alone. If I want products, I'll go,
So I've had two people. One was my stepmom, and one was an older lady that I know from church. They both had Windows 7, and they both inadvertently got upgraded to 10. And, like, these are, like, 70 or 80-year-old people, and they were not happy about being auto-upgraded. Like, they're just freaked out. Like, my printer stopped working. Everything's busted. So I really hope they stop, like, actually executing the upgrade without warning people.
Yeah, that's really sleazy. Like, completely 100% regardless of if the operating system is better or worse. It's just super sleazy to download it and install it unannounced.
And if you have a solid state drive that's only like 250 gig, like, how happy are you that there's 20 gigabytes of space being sucked up by Windows 10 that you haven't installed?
Yeah.
Right. Jesus.
But so Varendeel is asking, what are your thoughts on making the jump? Is it worth it while it's still free? Talking from a purely gaming perspective. My opinion is yes, it's worth doing the upgrade, especially if you're on Windows 8. I think it's you can go back and forth debate whether you think it is better or worse than Windows 7, but it is definitively, in my opinion, better than Windows 8. So if you're on 8, definitely upgrade, but while it's still free. From a gaming reason, I think it's probably worth it to upgrade just because DirectX 12 is going to start being more important down the road, and getting it for free now is probably worth that later.
I just hate being forced into it.
Yeah.
By stuff like that. Like
Yeah.
The only problems I've seen with Windows 10 is like certain older hardware does funny things. Like actually my GPU test bed. So all of my systems are Windows 10 now. I went in whole hog way back in like August of last year probably. But I have seen some systems like if I put my GPU test bed, if I tell it to shut down, it immediately turns back on. I tell it to sleep, it goes to sleep. So, there's some weird things that happen on some systems I've used, but in general, I'm like, I like the interface. I think it's good. It's way better than 8. And there's some things that are just low-level hardware changes or software changes that I think are better in Windows 8 and Windows 10 than Windows 7. So, like the DW in your desktop Windows Manager doesn't use as much memory in 8 as it does in 7. I maybe I've got that wrong. Maybe it was Vista that was bad. Anyway, I say upgrade. Go Windows 10 now because it's free. And I mean, if you're a gamer, like you're going to be recent enough hardware that it's not going to be painful. Like if you're a business, then it would be a really like, are you sure you want to do this? That's kind of crazy. But I think for most young people who are computer savvy and play games, I'm like, yeah, like you're not going to be hurting on Windows 10 just going, oh, this broke or that broke. I mean,
right. I mean, I think it's all going to be figure outable. There's bits of the UI. I mean, because I've got it here on a work computer, even though my home computer's still 8.1. But bits of the UI feel unintuitive in a way that they're like trying to be intuitive. But then I'm like, no, I don't want you to give me Google search results when I ask for Notepad. Like things like that. Like just little functionality things. It's trying to be too smart.
Yeah.
I don't know.
My biggest complaint is that I have to go through an extra screen or two to get to the screen resolution change.
Yeah, I really don't like that either. It's hidden behind advanced settings or something in there.
Yeah, like seriously, like they put it back on the desktop in Windows 7 because they moved it in Windows Vista and people got ticked. And then all of a sudden they're like, okay, we're putting it back hidden away again. Thanks.
And that's something, I mean, when I switched to 8.1 from 7, like there's a lot of stuff like resource manager and like all these little kind of stuff for tweaking and seeing how my computer's doing, stuff like that I've made shortcuts for. And some of them were harder to make shortcuts for in 8 than they were for 7. Like, you know, I mean, just things like sound. Like, I like to be able to jump into sound because I've got another speaker that I use if we're watching Game of Thrones or something and I don't want to put on headphones. But some of that's been more difficult in 8, and I worry that it'll be even more difficult to make shortcuts for that kind of stuff.
Actually, speaking of Windows 10, Skype, like I have to wear this headset. I have my USB headset here because my headset jack on my laptop, like it doesn't boost properly with Skype under Windows 10. So like I have to scream at it in order to be audible. And it's like a known bug, and there's all these workarounds that people suggested. None of them work. Skype is effectively broken with my integrated audio jack on my laptop and Windows 10.
Personally, I kind of hate Skype, so I'm okay with that. I've been using Discord for my gaming.
I'm on Skype right now. If you don't know, that's why that came up.
Yeah, we've got this little.
We hid the logo with a rocket science patch because they ain't paying us.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Also, what is this?
That joke totally fell flat. And okay.
What is this?
I agree.
Mystery
There's some people talking in the chat right now about Discord. I agree. I love Discord. I'm actually writing about. I spoke to the developers of Discord today. I'm writing a thing about Discord for later this week. So keep an eye out at PCGamer.com for that.
It's cool.
That being said,
one thing I have to say though about Discord.
Okay.
There's this weird fucking thing that happens with just one of my friends and I, where he can't hear me in Discord, and I can't hear him in the Battle.net Blizzard's launcher. They did an alpha for voice chat, so I can't hear him in Battle.net, and he can't hear me in Discord, so we've actually been running both recently. It works perfectly fine with everybody else. It's just this one guy, so I'm blaming his hardware.
That's so strange.
But yeah, anyway.
All right, we are far out of time. We've gone over because today was such a jam-packed episode. I just didn't want to stop talking about anything.
We didn't even get to go on a Heroes rant.
We didn't even get to go on a Heroes rant.
Deep into that.
Yeah, we were.
I forgot to talk about Broadwell E.
Yeah, why we didn't talk about Broadwell E?
It's been a busy week, but Jared, we're gonna have you on again to talk about that apparently, and we're also gonna have Will come on again to talk about Heroes. There's just too much stuff going on in PC gaming right now, but I'm very glad that you all joined us. We will be back again right here at twitch.tv/PCGamer every Wednesday, 1 p.m. Pacific time, currently Pacific Daylight Time because daylight savings is weird and scary. But if you are watching on YouTube at youtube.com/PCGamer or on iTunes on our podcast or at PCGamer.com/podcast on the latest post, wherever you're listening or watching, thank you very, very much. We appreciate it a lot. Jared, I'm glad that we could get you on and not have you crash. So that was
Thanks for
great.
having me. Yeah. I need to
and
go check out my laptop and figure out what went wrong.
we just see smoke billowing from behind you as the stream ends. But once again, thank you everyone for watching. We will see you next week.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, guys.